Alright, so The Mandalorian Season 3 debuted on Disney+. It finished its run, so today we are going to come here and talk about all 6 seasons of Star Wars television. Not even just the 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, 4 if you're counting Book of Boba Fett, but we're also going to add in Andor and Obi-Wan Kenobi into the mix. Now, just a little background with my experience with the Star Wars shows. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. There's only 2 movies I really like. And back in the day when Mandalorian first came out, I dug the show. I really did. But now, upon rewatch, I realize it's so chock full of problems and uninteresting things that the rewatch wasn't even good. And then a lot of the shows, I just have my individual problems with. Not a single one of them I think is great. I mean, even number 1 may even surprise you because that's the one that I had the most fun with. Just none of these shows are as investing or as interesting as I want them to be. So if it's going to be a jumbled ranking, I'm not the perfect Star Wars nerd like a lot of you are. So if you get mad at me, I'm sorry. With that said, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell, and comment down below what is your guys' ranking of the 6 Star Wars television seasons on Disney Plus, or how many you've seen. I know there's a lot of people who haven't seen Andor or Boba Fett because you guys really just don't care. You come for the Mandalorian. Just give me a ranking of what Star Wars television have you seen, and what is your ranking of them. With that said, 6th place goes to, and speaking of, Andor. And this is a disappointing one for me. Going into this show, I saw the trailers, I was like, I really dug that. It seemed like the thing that Disney Star Wars needed to put it back on the track after Rise of Skywalker and The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and everything that they have been putting out that wasn't great. And I sat down and watched it, and there were a couple episodes that were interesting, and those interesting episodes are really good, but overall, I couldn't even finish the show. I still technically have 2 episodes left that I'm not even going to bother to finish, because it starts out in just the most uninteresting way, to where you go in there, and each episode is the same thing over and over. The princess, or whatever she is, goes to talk with people about taking on the Empire. The guy who organized the rebels together, he's talking to try to take down the Empire. Andor's off there doing whatever. And there comes a point in the show to where you sit back and you're like, this is pretty much a drag to get through. And I could really get some real progress on other Star Wars shows, especially rewatching The Mandalorian, that I needed to do before the new season came out. And so, throwing that aside, I mean, I got so much progress on shows because I wasn't forcing myself to watch a show. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't fun to watch. It was a drag to get through each and every episode. Like I said, the 2 episodes that I thought were really good were really interesting, got me excited for the next ones. But then the next one is just characters sitting around and talking about the same things they've talked about all series long. It's just not interesting to me. It comes a point to where you sit back and you get bored. And this show is where I got my point. I did not like Andor. I just couldn't even finish it. And so, therefore, it has to go in last place. 5th place, The Mandalorian Season 1. And when this first came out, I think everybody was down by the excitement of Disney Plus. New big streaming service, has all the Disney things on it. This is the first original. I think everybody was just so excited because of that. Because it seemed blindsided that especially me and my whole family, I definitely did not notice the problems when I first watched it. Of course, I wasn't a film critic yet, but now I am. And so rewatching it, I noticed a whole bunch of problems. First off, this is not interesting at all. It doesn't have a basic story, so it doesn't have... The final 2 episodes are the only bits of story we have. The rest of it is Mandalorian goes on side quests. And I just could not get interested in it. Again, just like Andor, this felt like a drag to get through the season. I sat back each episode like, oh, what side quest is going on here? Cool, are we going to learn anything about the actual plot of the show? No, didn't think so. And so when we head into the final 2 episodes, the big 2-parter, it just felt like, you know those Disney XD Marvel shows, the animated ones? It felt like that, where they have a 2-parter that actually makes sense, and then you go back to random Mandalorian side quests. I just didn't find it interesting or fun at all. Of course, the cast here is great. Baby Yoda is obviously a phenomenon. The action is pretty good. I'm not even going to lie there. But just the story-wise and how the show is paced out is just not interesting at all, to where each episode I just felt like I was forced to sit there and watch it because I want to see the new season, and so I didn't really remember anything about it. And let me just say that I don't ever think I want to rewatch this show again, especially to get through the first season. It was such a drag. Now, I get it. It's a novelty of it being the first Disney Plus TV series. But, I mean, it's just not interesting, especially compared to Season 2. And even Season 3 is interesting. This one is just a drag. Speaking of Season 3, we got in 4th place, Mando Season 3. Now, being honest here, when it comes down to actually being a Mandalorian season, and the final 2 episodes where we actually decide to go and take over Mandalore, that is when the show is at its greatest. I think those are the 2 greatest Mandalorian episodes. They're interesting, they're full of action, they're full of emotional moments. But the way to get there was just not focused and so scatterbrained. Felt like I was high watching this. I'm serious. Each episode, I come home from work or come home and watch an episode, I sat back and was like, what am I watching? It just felt real trippy. And I don't know why. Because in the first 2 episodes, we get Mando has to go and he has to drench himself in the holy water so he becomes a Mandalorian again. That's cool. The rest of the episodes are, after that, we get an episode of Andor in there where it sees how incompetent the New Republic is, which didn't really go anywhere in the season. We get an episode of just the Blade Runner type where they go and they try to fight some robots. We get an episode even where Mando is fighting a giant bird. And just the way to get there, we get 8 episodes in the season, and 2 of them, so that means 6 episodes, did not want to be the central premise. We all knew from Season 2, the way Season 2 left off, is that Mandalorian Season 3 is going to be about Bo-Katan and the Mandalorian trying to regain Mandalore. Right? That's literally not what this season is about at all. Literally not. We get in there, and like I said, we start out with the premises, Mandalorian's got to get the holy water so he becomes a Mandalorian. That's cool. That's the premise. Like, beyond that, there's nothing besides Bo-Katan wants to be a Mandalorian and go there so she can, I don't know. It's just so scatterbrained. And it just does not work in the slightest. It feels like a trip. I was so trippy while watching this because it feels like, what are we doing here? What is the central goal that we're doing here? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we're going to go do Mandalore. And we get 1 episode there. And then we get the rest of the episodes. And I was like, cool. That worked. But why wasn't the rest of the season like this? And personally, it wasn't a drag to get through. It had some fun moments. Each episode I walked out, I was like, that was cool in a little ways. But just the overall of it, I don't understand what they're doing here for Season 3, what the writing room is doing. I think you need to hire some new writers. This is the premise you get for a season of Mandalorian. Taking off our top 3, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And this is a series that, honestly, it wasn't a drag to get through. It wasn't bad. It was just a show that I sat back and I watched each week and I was like, that was there. That's it. The show was there. It was there for my consumption, for me to watch and enjoy. It was there. And that is completely fine. Because it is 6 episodes of me coming home from work, coming home from whatever I'm doing, shutting my brain off for a couple hours, and watching some lightsaber battles. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It is not particularly interesting. And for an Obi-Wan show, some may say that's a bit disappointing. Like, you want the Obi-Wan show to be, like, super interesting. And it definitely was not. But it was a fine show. I sat back for 6 episodes and I enjoyed myself. Going into some positives, I really did like the battles between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. Interesting stuff had to happen between that time zone, right? So why wouldn't they just go out and fight? And there were some interesting fights there, some emotions that you got there. The chemistry between Leia and Obi-Wan was cool. Of course, I was really surprised that we had Obi-Wan going to rescue Princess Leia. Like, that was a surprise for the season. And it worked in a way. Sure, there were some dumb moments, like her running through the forest while grown men are like, oh, a tree. My bad. That is just ridiculous to me. But like I said, there's not really anything super positive. There's not really anything super negative. I was a bit disappointed by the show only because it should have been so much more, but it wasn't. And I sat back and I was like, that was a fine show though. I sat back, 6 episodes, had fun with it. Of course, it's not great. I wouldn't even consider it to be better than good. I would just consider it to be like, it was a fine show. And that's what it was there for. That's what worked. That's what I got. In second place, our runner-up, Mando Season 2. And compared to Season 1, it decides to have Mandalorian go on all these side quests, which I still didn't like. But instead of having him go on the side quests and then having a random story thrown at the end, we got him going on these side quests and then having a story go along with it. The Empire wants Grogu. Mandalorian has to go find a Jedi to train Grogu. Combine that together, that makes for a much more interesting story than Season 1's story of, oh, all of a sudden they want the Baby Yoda. Cool. It's interesting in a way. I really did dig the story here, and I really want to know what the Empire was up to. I really like Moff Gideon as a villain, not only because he's played by the excellent Giancarlo Esposito, who was in Breaking Bad, obviously, but he's played a terrifying villain in there. He's playing a terrifying villain in here. I really just dug the action in the season. I feel like the bigger budget for the season provided bigger action sequences. And like I said, if you just combine the story, if you focus the story, this is the best season by far. And I don't see why seasons 1 or 3 couldn't be like this. Season 1 and 3 were so scatterbrained. This one gets a track. It sets on it. The track is Mandalorian has to find a Jedi to train Grogu. Then he has to stop the Empire because they kidnapped Grogu. And we get Boba Fett in there. We get Bo-Katan in there. We get Ahsoka in there. There's just so much interesting things going on here that I didn't feel at all like I don't want to watch this show. I felt each time I sat down to watch it, I am excited to finish this show because it works. It's interesting and it just fits what I wanted this show to be. It's the most interesting season of The Mandalorian. Probably the most interesting season of all the seasons. But that doesn't mean it's my favorite. And that's why number 1 is going to The Book of Boba Fett. The technically prequel series off of The Mandalorian. Honestly, I had a blast with this one. Instead of being this big story about Mando and Grogu and everybody else trying to defeat the Empire, it decides to be a small-scale story about Boba Fett being king of this planet and now tries to defend terrorists from the planet. Now, I can understand all of your negatives with this one. It's don't gotta focus story. It's basically The Mandalorian Season 3. The villain isn't utilized. I can understand that. But for me, who has not been enjoying watching The Mandalorian, it's a nice change of pace from the previous seasons. Obviously, there's a bunch of cringe moments. I don't necessarily love the main actor in the role here, but it was a fun story, and I honestly like the villain. I honestly did not mind that it turned into a Mandalorian season, because these are some of the best episodes of The Mandalorian ever put out there. I dug it. I enjoyed the action. I enjoyed the adventure. The finale is fun. That's what this show is. It's a fun show, and unlike Mandalorian, where it's got to be this big galaxy-sweeping quest, unlike Andor, where it's against the Empire, unlike Obi-Wan, where it's against the Empire, it takes a small, focused story, makes it fun, and makes it to be the most entertaining out of all of the Star Wars shows. That is why Book of Boba Fett takes number 1. Now, I do got a bunch of videos coming up. I'm going to rank CinemaCon. I got reviews of Peter Pan and Wendy and Renfield coming up. I got ranking of all April movies. I'm still pretty behind, but I mean, I do have a bunch of videos more coming up. Thank you guys for clicking on this video, and with that said, subscribe to join the Nerd Army. Peace out.